Hi everybody, my name is Tu Tran. I am the nursing director of operations. I basically run everything that's back office related. Quality assurance is important. Staff support is actually even more important. I make sure that things run as smoothly as possible so the staff is able to provide excellent care and service for our patients.
We'll uncover the real differences, the myths, and the truths behind these price points. This is the $1,000 versus $50,000 hair transplant showdown. And this is the scale that we'll be using to rate the results. It goes from needs improvement to exceptional. Our first case is a $1,000 procedure from Turkey. This was a case of about 2,000 grafts performed via FUE technique. When I look at these images, what I see is that there's a nice hairline design. The hairline was not placed too low. As I've said in many of my other videos, you have to be careful about placing the hairline too low.
Okay, so the interesting thing about the hairline is, yeah, he's right. You don't want the hairline to actually be down in the middle of your forehead or near your eyebrows. Hairline placement is really key, so that part is true. Now, he likes the hairline on this guy. I'm like, the hairline on this guy, the issue is that the angle of the picture, the eyebrows are actually kind of slanted down. You want to see the actual hairline accuracy, you should probably just have the head more at a flat plane, and so you can have the hairline more straight on. We don't know if it's crooked. We don't know the actual depth, because if it's tilted, it gives you a different optical illusion. So for this picture, yeah, sure. It looks like a decent hairline. Better than what he had before. I would agree with that, sure. The comparative before and after pictures, it's not an apples to apples comparisons, like apples to like an orange. So they're both fruit, but they're a little different. So if you wanted to really see the before and after and with the bang, you should do in the after as you did in the before.
Build up enough density to account for further thinning that can occur further back on the scalp. I think this procedure really helped reframe the face for this gentleman.
Can't see the face, but okay.
At the hairline, as I look at the frontal few rows of hairs, I am seeing some heavier grafts at the hairline. And that's something that should be avoided, because when you're trying to create a natural hairline, what you see in most hairlines is that you have these kind of finer, wispier hairs in the first few rows, and then it gets into the heavier grafts. So if those heavier grafts surgically are placed right in the front, it gives it a less natural type of appearance.
That part is true. So hairline should usually be done with singles. If you put 2 or 3 haired grafts, or which is like 2 to 3 follicular units, it creates more like a doll-like look. It looks fake. So when people look at you, they will tend to tilt their head and it will stare at your hairline and wonder, why is it off? It's off because it's not natural. You tend to have smaller, wispier hairs in the front. So we mimic that, especially here with singles in the front. The $1,000 FUE, Turkey prices are weird. I've had clients come to me where they're like, oh, I paid $3,400 for 5,000 grafts, or they cover my hotel, they covered the flights. I don't know what they did, but to also be very clear, there's an exchange rate involved. So depending on when they purchased or they performed their surgery, what is the exchange rate of the US dollar versus the currency of Turkey? So sometimes the dollar is really strong. So yeah, maybe you can get that much for $1,000 at that time, you know. But as of right now, the last things I've heard was, I've heard a $3,000 to $5,000 range. Hotel, limo, everything included. Not included is safety, but we can talk about that in another one.
Element that I'm seeing here is that when you look on the left side of the hairline, the frontal inch lacks density. When you're creating hairlines, you want to make sure that that frontal inch gets solid density and that it gets prioritized over areas that are further back. The overall rating for this case is good. Now let's take a look at another procedure. This one also cost about $1,000, and it was also performed in Turkey. The graft count here is unknown. First off, let's discuss the design of the hairline. Even to me, the marker that was used is a bit too thick. The overall width of that blue line is probably about 1 centimeter. So you have to decide, is the hairline going to be right in the middle of that blue line? Is it going to be towards the top or towards the bottom of the blue line? Where you place it along that blue line is going to give a very different appearance. So that really isn't the most ideal way to mark things out for a hair transplant. It's much better to use very small dots along the hairline or a fine tipped marker that's much more accurate. To me also, the design.
Yes, the thickness of the marker that is used can definitely have a play with where the grafts are actually placed. The thicker it is, it can be more difficult for people to do micro movements or micro placements of grafts. So when you use dots or very fine point pen to outline donor areas or recipient areas, it's very helpful to have a sharp one. So I actually would agree with this one. But yeah, this guy's results suck. I'm gonna put that out there right now. It's not very sexy for $1,000. He probably got, I don't know, maybe like, if he did both sides, I would say like 800 grafts, maybe 1,000. They all look like singles. It's super sparse. I don't know if the quality of grafts were good or when they harvested, if they messed up and nicked the grafts and therefore they didn't grow. Unsure. Really unsure.
Shows that there's a bit too much medialized recession. So when I create a hairline, I like to create that rounding that goes into the temple a bit further lateral than where I see it created here. And this could be a personal preference, but it's not the way that I prefer to design hairlines for my patients. Now, when you look at the density that's been created with this procedure, it's clearly low. Yeah. So either too few grafts were transplanted or the survival of the grafts that were transplanted was not great. Either way, the area clearly lacks density. Now, in looking at the direction and angulation of the hairs, to me, it does not follow the natural hairs. I think that the hairs here are sticking up too much. They should be at a bit more of a flat angle. At least that's what I see when I compare it to the angle and direction of his original hair. And also at the hairline, there isn't enough irregularity. In creating hairlines, you definitely want to maintain a general shape, so you need to have some structure built in. However, you need to irregularize the hairline enough so that it looks real. And because of all these stated points, I would put the rating here at a needs improvement.
Yes.
Now let's get into $5,000 hair transplants. This first case at the $5,000 mark comes from Turkey, and it's a 5,000 graft case with FUE. Now this to me looks impressive. There's significant improvement for a patient who is in need.
So 5,000 FUE in one procedure. If this is FUE only, the suspicion that I have is, one, I would love to see a picture of the donor area of when they finished the extraction, because I have a suspicion that to get the 5,000, they probably subdivided, which means that when we extract a follicular unit and it has 3s, 4s, or multiples, they cut it down to singles and then count that as one individual follicular unit. Now, it is sexy. You know, the guy does have hair where he did not have hair, which is actually really nice. But then again, I'm always curious on like, what did we brush the hair in the opposite direction? What do we see scalp, right? Most likely we'll see scalp, but when you use one to cover the opposite side, you don't know if there's actually any hair there. And yeah, 5,000 is, unless they really harvested far and went into other areas. Again, I would love to see the donor area of that, which they probably will not post, which I would not be surprised about.
Norwood 7. And there's clearly good conservative hairline design that was implemented. And that really is what set the stage for this result. If they placed the hairline too low and too flat, they would never have been able to build up this type of density. And
to be very clear, the hairline looks like it's up here for some odd reason. Again, the guy's picture, chin is tucked all the way in, and we cannot see where it's actually leveled out.
Would have looked off. But this case was properly planned, designed, and executed.
It does look natural.
The hair is being combed over in the after image, so it's hard to exactly tell density, but overall, this is a nice result considering the starting point. And this is just a reminder that I'm not a fan of mega sessions when it comes to FUE. So 5,000 grafts in one session is a lot, and that could potentially lead to over harvesting and poor donor scarring. And again, with these images, we're a bit limited in the assessment of the donor area, so we're not able to say how the scarring looks in the back. But my overall rating here for this case is great. Now let's take a look at another procedure that was done for $5,000, also out of Turkey, with 3,900 grafts. For nearly 4,000 grafts, I don't really see much change, and it actually looks like it might be worse post-operatively. Now, the reasons for this might be due to poor survival of the grafts, but it also might be because of lack of medical therapy. Oftentimes, people go into a hair transplant not knowing or not wanting to do any kind of medical therapy.
Okay, so again, those pictures are not equivalent. One hair looks like it's really wet and one hair is dry. So that one's really hard to kind of assess on an equal playing field. His results don't look that great. For 4,000 grafts, I would agree with him. It doesn't look that great. When you do a hair transplant and you don't actually supplement it with any type of medical interventions like finasteride or minoxidil creams or things like that, if this is, your hair loss already, and then we implant our hair or your hair, we implant it, the hair that you have will probably still be prone to DHT attachment. So your hair still continues to die and the hair transplant stays. So aesthetically, it actually still looks like you're losing hair, but in reality, we put permanent hair there, but you're still losing your natural hair. To slow that down, then yes, people do recommend finasteride and other things like that. In our company, we don't force that upon people, but we definitely recommend all these extra support to be able to improve your hair restoration journey as a whole. If some people think one and done, not necessarily. Your genetics still play a factor. Your stress and your hormones definitely still play a factor. So you need to address those things to be able to maintain. I think that people get into a weird perspective where they're like, well, it's not like it's a breast augmentation where, okay, you go in, you get these foreign things in you and it kind of stays with you. In this case, your hair loss situation is something that will occur with living, aging, and you have to address those things. You want to have a nice body, you have to keep working out. You stop working out, your body's not going to be sexy anymore. Same thing with hair care. Yes, the hair transplant is going to give you some great results, but if you want to slow down your original hair, you need to do interventions to take care of it. Laser therapy, which is what I use with my husband, works really well. Finasteride, topical, oral, those are also options as well. But I would agree with this doctor in that case is that you might need to do both to be able to have the most optimal results that you're looking for.
And so if you continue to thin out, even the course of the year post-op, then when you look at the results of your surgery at a year, you might be worse off than where you started. Sure. Because of the continued hair loss from just natural aging and the androgenic alopecia process. I always tell my patients that it's important to stabilize your hair in advance of surgery. And often this stability is achieved with medical therapy such as finasteride and minoxidil. To find out more about these medications, head to feelconfident.com. My rating for this case is needs improvement. Now let's look at a case that was about $7,500. This procedure was done in Canada and it involved 846 FUE grafts. That's quite specific. Considering the number of grafts, this was under 1,000 grafts. I think that this case shows excellent survival, really fantastic direction and angulation of the hair, and the density created looks great for under 1,000 grafts.
So it's weird because is it the same person? Because first of all, the hair color is very different. We have dark brown and then black hair. And the shape of that guy's head looks different from that guy's, the guy's neck is very different from that guy's. I don't know if it's the same person. 846 grafts, yes, let's just say that you had an excellent harvester and you had a lot of multiples. That's actually a pretty big crown area. 846 would definitely improve it, but I don't know if it would improve it to this degree. So I want to scream fraud. This is super, super suspicious to me because I don't think it's the same person. When it comes to the crown, actually, because the crown is at the tip of your head, which is a spherical shape, you actually need a lot more than you realize to be able to satisfy the optical illusion of your bald area. So you think you're not that bald, you're actually more bald than you realize. And then when we give 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 grafts in that area, you need a lot more to present with that, bang or that result that you're like, oh, my crown is taken care of. So this to me, with 846 grafts, unless they're multiples of 7 follicular units in each one, which is probably where I'm a little bit, again, suspicious. These people look like completely different people. Sure, the guy could dye his hair and stuff like that, but literally the back of his neck and everything looks just different to me. So I don't know if this is the same one.
can always come back to that clinic or somewhere else for a small touch-up procedure, but this to me looks like a great result. One note here is that I do like to see consistency in the before and after images, and this is in terms of the hair color, the length of hair, the lighting conditions, and the background that's being used. But keep in mind that this isn't always possible for logistical reasons.
Sure.
Some patients travel in from far away, they can't always come back to the clinic where they had surgery, so they might email in photos, and of course those are never going to be quite the same as the photos that were taken in the office. My rating for this case is exceptional. Moving on to $10,000
so
hair
exceptional,
transplants.
you know, it's
this
probably
case
fraud.
was done in Greece, and it involved 5,100 FUE grafts. There is a significant density improvement here. That to me is obvious. When you zoom in at the hairline, there is a slight plugginess appearance to it. And the angle at which the grafts were placed right at the hairline to me appear that they're not acute enough. You can see in the preoperative image how the hair lays fairly flat. And so when you do the procedure, you need to make sure to recreate that type of appearance. So my guess is that right in those frontal, 4 or 5 rows, the hair is most likely at about a 30-degree angle at most for this patient. But to me, the way that it was transplanted appears like it's a greater angle than that. And also finer hairs are needed at the frontal few rows to give it a very natural type of appearance. You want the finer hairs to then blend into the heavier hairs further back. I give this procedure a good rating. Next up is a $25,000 procedure out of Canada, and this involved over 8,000 grafts using the FUT technique. This should serve as
8,402 grafts, FUT. So FUT is definitely the strip method where they take literally a piece of your scalp and then chop it up into smaller pieces. Now, if they chop everything down to singles to get that 8,400, I can see that. If they kept the groupings naturally, usually that would be down. Honestly, a 3,000 strip is pretty big. I'm curious on how, I don't know if this guy's skin was super elastic, where he had a lot of extra skin where we can just, cut it out. I don't know how long the strip is. The scar, is it from ear to ear? It's a little bit more forward. Okay, let's just say that 8,402 grafts. Picture's not as consistent. It looks like it's the same guy. It looks like it's the same burry eyebrows and the hairs on the side. Background's a little bit different color. The results look really good though. The results look really good. So I actually like it. And I think from this blurry picture, even his hairline's actually natural looking.
Reminder to all of us of how powerful FUT surgery is. It can truly generate an incredible yield of grafts compared to FUE surgery in a single session, but also over time as you do several procedures. As many clinics move away from FUT surgery to doing exclusively FUE procedures, and especially men seek out the FUE techniques, a lot of times what can be created with FUT is forgotten, but this is a nice reminder. And so in addition to the density that over 8,000 grafts brought in, there's also a natural hairline that was created here, both macroscopically and microscopically, and that really is impressive. The immense improvement that this patient shows is undeniable, so my rating here is exceptional. Now,
yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that was an exceptional result. That's the result that you want for every single client. $25,000, I would definitely spend that money if I knew I was gonna get that result. And yeah, I definitely think that would be worth it. The strips though, there is another reason why the whole industry is kind of moving away from that, because at the end of the day, men do not like having a linear scar. Women, when we get plastic surgery, we don't like scars anywhere, right? Liposuction, breast augmentation, anything, we don't want scars, but scars are inevitable when you actually cut the skin. In this case, yes, patients are like, oh, well, you have a linear scar and, the hair will cover. But actually, as you age and your hair loss continues, some men change their mind 10 years down the line. They're like, you know what, maybe I want to shave everything down, or I want to have a shorter cut. I want to go down to a 0 instead of a 1. I want to have a better fade, whatever it is. If the scar is not nice, it actually makes the patient more self-conscious. I've had men tell me they regret doing the FUT. Regardless of the graft count, they got 2,500, 3,000, okay, if they're able to get those numbers, which is great. The results themselves are okay, but the men, some of them hate touching the back of their head and feeling that scar tissue, some of them keloid. And we do scar revisions, right? We try to soften up the look. People do tattooing, SMP, to be able to actually address those areas too. If you gave men or people a choice of scar, no scar, they would always prefer no linear scar. The FUE, I'm not going to say it's scarless. It doesn't have a linear scar, but it has, I would say, micropigmented scar, which is like these little circular white dots or hypopigmented dots of where the FUE was done. But it looks actually still a lot more natural than a linear cross incision from ear to ear. And if you had multiple strips, sometimes it's from the same incision scar, or some doctors cut other lines. And now you have multiple linear scars in the back of your head. You cannot only feel that, but if you shave it down, you will be able to see it, and people get really self-conscious. And when it comes to the hair restoration journey, people are already very vulnerable. And unless they are asking for the strip or something, most of them feel better with the FUE because it allows them to have more confidence in the future and gives them more options if they were to choose to actually shave the back of their head. But yeah, but do they yield better grafts? With the best harvester and the best strip, I was like, they can be comparable, but I've definitely had a lot of physicians tell me that, oh, the strip will always have the best, the best grafts. But that may be true if it's the same hand touching the FUE and the FUT. But the FUT, I know that the physicians are not doing the slivering. They're not actually cutting down. They take out the big strip, and then it's cut down by medical assistants or nurses or whatever to individual units. And that is contingent on that particular person's skill set. So can't always guarantee excellence, if you have a variety of people taking care of each piece. It's very hard to have that quality assurance.
Let's look at another $25,000 hair transplant,
okay.
This time from the US. And this was about 2,600 FUE grafts. In my opinion, this is very nice restructuring of the hairline. I see overall good density that was generated. Agree. And remember that curly hair is more challenging to work with.
Yes.
It's both harder to harvest because of the curvature of the hairs beneath the surface of the skin, and also it's harder to implant because you have to follow that curvature. So that's what makes it just overall more challenging to work with.
Yes, curly hair is the most challenging type of hair in the hair industry as a whole. And when you do the strip, you're able to capture the curl of the follicular unit really well. An FUE, that requires a certain specific skill to be able to do that, and some clinics can't, and some clinics can. It is a very, very specialized skill. So if you do have curly hair, I recommend you find a physician that is local to you, or you can fly around if you prefer, but find someone that actually is an expert in curly hair. They might say so, but then if they're doing small numbers of 1,200 or 1,500, then they're not an expert. I've definitely seen people able to do 2,000, 2,600 on very coarse or curly hair. It's just a matter of the technique and the experience of that particular harvester. It is possible. The beautiful thing about curly hair, when it actually grows in, it creates a lot more volume and it provides more coverage. So when the hairs actually grow in, it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So go US. I'm very happy with this one. 1 point for the United States. Woo!
Curlier hair. But on the flip side, each hair goes a longer distance because it starts to curl, and so it has better coverage compared to a finer straight hair. So the appearance of what you create with, say, thinner, straighter hair of maybe 2,500 grafts might equate to what you get out of 2,000 curly hairs. My one critique of this case is that as you look at the hairline laterally, as you get closer to the temples, there is a dip that occurs right around the connection to the temple. Now, this might be how the patient wanted their hairline designed, but to me, there is a reduction of naturality that at least hits my eye. So I give this case a rating of great. And now let's look at a $50,000 hair transplant. And this one was done in Canada with over 9,000 grafts with FUT technique. This $50,000 result again shows the power of FUT surgery. But most men in my practice don't even want to consider FUT because of the linear scar that it leaves behind. But maybe the pendulum has swung too far towards FUE surgery, and perhaps we should bring back FUT in the right scenario. One critique that I have for this incredible result is at the central hairline. To me, it looks like it could be more dense and less flat appearing, and I would prioritize that central frontal area over the desire for incredible scalp coverage. My rating for this case is great. In the world of hair transplants, a high price tag isn't always synonymous with top-tier results, nor does a bargain guarantee disappointment. It's the surgeon's artistry and expertise that truly counts. Choose wisely, prioritize safety, and remember, your head is the canvas and you want the best artist to craft your masterpiece.
Sure. I mean, he isn't wrong. That $50,000 procedure, the results were, I would agree with him, they were good. It's not perfect, right? If I was paying $50,000, I would want it to be perfect down to every strand of hair. So that wasn't perfect. So I wouldn't say it's worth $50,000. The quote of you get what you pay for, I do agree to that like quote, maybe I would say 90%. Here's the thing, you want to find value. You don't want a place that gyps you. You don't want a place that like treats you like a number where they will take advantage of you, charge you up the wazoo because they can arbitrarily. However, you don't want to go to a place that is undercutting or doing something that's weird and is able to get you a really, really good deal. What you actually want is, as he says, prioritize safety. Safety is number one, and value. You want a place that treats you right. You want a place that does everything right and charges you fairly. Now, depending on the graft count and where you are, where you're located, yes, that could fall into the range of, I don't know, 10 to 20,000. I would say between those areas, that is definitely fair, considering your hair loss as well as how much you're able to donate from the back of your head. If you don't have hair back here, hair transplant is not for you. You're not actually a candidate whatsoever. But for me, every single time a price tag is too low, I always get a little bit uncomfortable. I'm like, how did they make it that low? What are they skipping? Who are they not hiring? What are they not doing to be able to get it that low? And when it's too high, I'm like, you're probably lying to me. And, that's also dishonest. So I think somewhere the Goldilocks in between is probably key, which I would say safety and value is what I would recommend you guys be looking for.